While Rudeus is stumbling through his post-disaster grief elsewhere in the world, Sylphie's own story kicks off in dramatic fashion. Swept up by the teleportation catastrophe, she finds herself inside the royal palace of the Kingdom of Asura, where she accidentally kills a monster that was threatening Princess Ariel's life, an act of heroism that also bleaches her iconic green hair Snow White. Ariel, being the shrewd political operator she is, immediately clocks Sylphie's power and uses the threat of a trespassing charge to blackmail her into becoming a royal bodyguard under the alias Fitz. We quickly learn that Ariel is neck-deep in a dangerous succession feud with her brother Grabble, supported loyally by her other guard, Luke, and his father, Lord Pillamon. The episode takes a surprisingly tender turn when Ariel and Sylphie bond over shared nightmares. Ariel's from her near-death experience, Sylphie's from the teleportation disaster, and agree to sleep together for comfort. That same night, Sylphie thwarts an assassination attempt arranged by Grabble. When Lord Pillamon suggests Ariel study abroad for her own safety, Ariel offers to release Sylphie. But Sylphie, having found in Ariel a friend and confidant she didn't expect, chooses to stay. We finally catch up with Rudeus, and the picture is not pretty. Reeling from Eris's sudden departure, he is a walking shell of a person, trudging northward in search of Zenith, his missing mother. His first order of business is the painful, symbolic act of formally disbanding the Dead End Party, closing a chapter of his life that gave him so much purpose. Desperate for money to continue traveling, he reluctantly joins an adventuring party called Counter Arrow, comprised of frontline fighters Suzanne and Patrice, Mage Timothy, Healer Mimir, and Archer Sarah. From the jump, Sarah is mistrustful of Rudeus, and he catches himself projecting his feelings about Eris onto her. Things come to a head when a routine quest to slay grizzlies turns into a survival crisis, and watching Counter Arrow fight desperately for their lives snaps Rudeus out of his suicidal numbness and forces him to act. After helping to drive off the grizzlies, he is welcomed into the party. In a quiet but powerful moment, Rudeus reflects that he hasn't truly lost everything. Roxy is still out there, his family still exists, and in an act of emotional closure, he burns the lock of Eris's hair he had been carrying as a keepsake. Time passes, and Rudeus gradually rebuilds his reputation in Basharant, operating on the hope that word of his adventures will trickle back to Zenith or someone who knows her. He joins Counter Arrow on a quest to collect snowdrake scales, though the job is complicated by an unexpected run-in with a rival party called Stepped Leader. Despite the friction, Counter Arrow completes the mission successfully, and Sarah manages to coax Rudeus into joining a victory celebration, a small but meaningful step towards social reconnection. The night goes sour when Stepped Leader's leader, Soldat, gets drunk and publicly calls out Rudeus for obviously holding back his true power, creating an air of tension. But the real drama strikes the next morning. Mimir has been killed and Sarah has gone missing during a quest, with the rest of Counter Arrow forced back by a blizzard. Without hesitation, Rudeus ventures alone into the forest, recovers Mimir's remains, and brings Sarah home safe. The gratitude that Sarah and the rest of the party shower on him cracks open an emotional dam, and Rudeus finds himself recovering pieces of his lost emotional range. Emboldened by the rescue, Sarah grows closer to Rudeus and eventually asks him on a date, which escalates to her making her romantic and sexual interest in him abundantly clear. This is where Rudeus discovers, to his profound shame, that he is suffering from erectile dysfunction, an issue rooted in the deep emotional damage Eris's abandonment left behind. Sarah leaves, disappointed and confused, and Rudeus, mortified, attempts to drink himself into oblivion. In his drunken state, he vents to Soldat, who intuits that the problem is psychological, specifically a subconscious terror of rejection from women. A visit to a local brothel with a worker named Elise only confirms this. She can't help him either. The situation spirals catastrophically when a drunk Rudeus, walking home in frustration, goes on a bitter rant about Sarah, and Sarah overhears every word. She slaps him and exits his life for good. With his depression crashing back full force, Rudeus comes terrifyingly close to suicide before Soldat intervenes and, in a genuinely life-saving act, offers him a new direction: come clear a labyrinth in the neighboring Duchy of Neris. Meanwhile, Elise, searching for Rudeus, learns he's headed north. This episode compresses 2 full years into a tight, purposeful montage of Rudeus adventuring alongside Soldat's party, culminating in him taking down a red dragon entirely on his own, a feat that cements his reputation as an elite mage. His reunion with Elise brings critical news. Paul and Roxy have already traveled to the Begarit continent and are operating out of the Labyrinth city of Rapa in their search for Zenith. Rudeus decides to sit tight in the Northlands through winter before making his way to Begarit, and gets a crash course in Elise's legendary and somewhat scandalous promiscuity in the meantime. Then a letter arrives from the Ranoa University of Magic, inviting Rudeus to attend as a special student on the strength of his recent exploits. He's intrigued but plans to prioritize finding Zenith until the human god visits him in a dream and dangles an unexpected carrot. Enroll in the university, investigate the teleportation disaster, and it will cure his impotence. That offer, perhaps unsurprisingly, is exactly persuasive enough. Rudeus accepts, and with Elise tagging along, they journey to the kingdom of Ranoa. Rudeus arrives at Ranoa University of Magic. During his entrance examination, Rudeus is pitted in a mock duel against a quiet, mysterious student named Fitz, who is, of course, Sylphie in disguise, wearing sunglasses and her white-haired alias. Rudeus defeats Fitz and earns his enrollment, not suspecting for a moment who he just fought. He then sits through a polished speech by Ariel, who is the student council president, and settles into homeroom, where he is gleefully reunited with Zenoba and introduced to Beast Girl students Linnea and Persena, as well as the self-important Cliff Grimoire, who mentions knowing Rudeus through Eris. Rudeus then meets Luke, who casually reveals he is also a Grey Rat and Rudeus' cousin. The episode caps off with an absurd but hilarious incident involving Ariel's underwear falling from a window onto Rudeus, resulting in an angry mob of female students accusing him of theft, before Fitz, the very person who dropped them, shows up to defend him with barely concealed violence. Fitz apologizes, but in a teasing moment of deliberate restraint, decides not to reveal who she really is to Rudeus just yet. University life begins to suit Rudeus surprisingly well, and this episode shows him settling into a comfortable academic rhythm, studying unfamiliar branches of magic, collaborating with Fitz on research into the teleportation disaster, and generally functioning like a semi-normal person for the first time in years. The complications arrive when Rudeus starts developing a confusing crush on Fitz, which he finds deeply baffling since he still believes Fitz is male. Rudeus takes on the task of helping Zenoba learn to sculpt, only to run into an insurmountable wall. Zenoba's complete lack of magic control and his superhuman strength make him catastrophically bad at fine work. Fitz offers a practical solution: buy a slave who can do the sculpting for Zenoba. The three of them visit the local slave market and purchase a young dwarf girl they name Julie. Rudeus begins tutoring Julie in both magic and basic life skills, continuing to quietly, steadily become a teacher and caretaker, roles that are, in many ways, healing him far more than he realizes. Sylphie quietly begins processing her own romantic feelings for Rudeus from behind the safety of her Fitz disguise, watching him grow back into himself at close range. The real chaos, however, is triggered by a sculpture. When Zenoba proudly shows Julie Rudeus's sculpture of Rudeus, Rudeus asks about the Roxy sculpture he'd also made, and gets the uncomfortable confession that Zenoba lost a duel to Linnea and Persena in his first year, and they destroyed the sculpture. Rudeus, deeply protective of Roxy's honor, is furious. He defeats both Beast Girls in a fight and locks them in his room, but leaves them tied up so long that they wet themselves. He consults Fitz on how to discipline them without creating lasting enemies, and together they land on the perfect revenge: force the girls to walk around for a day wearing humiliating face markings. The plan works brilliantly. Linnea and Persena leave Rudeus's room with a grudging respect, particularly after learning he trained under Ghislaine. The episode ends with Rudeus and Fitz spending quiet time together, and Fitz nearly removes her sunglasses to show him her face before losing her nerve at the last moment. The romantic subplots begin proliferating wildly in this episode. Cliff surprises Rudeus by approaching him for an introduction to Elena-Lise, on whom he has developed a very earnest, very serious crush. Rudeus obliges and privately warns Elena-Lise that her curse, which compels her to sleep with multiple men or face deteriorating health, makes a single-partner relationship effectively impossible. He advises her to let Cliff down gently. The next morning, he discovers they are already in a committed relationship, with Cliff having grandly promised to lift the curse himself. You have to respect the audacity. Meanwhile, a different kind of chaos erupts when the beastmen of the university start challenging Rudeus to duels for the right to marry Linnea and Persena. The Beast Girls, it turns out, have been telling everyone that Rudeus is their pack leader. The challenger parade is hilariously interrupted by the arrival of Demon King Baragati, Kishirika's fiancé, who has heard her speak highly of Rudeus and wants to test him personally. Rudeus wins the duel by landing the first decisive hit, which is apparently enough to satisfy a Demon King's honor. As winter arrives, the class is collectively baffled when Baragati, far from being put out, has enrolled in the university and joined their homeroom with the energy of someone who is absolutely thrilled to be there. Fitz is quietly building up her courage to reveal herself to Rudeus, but is paralyzed by the fear that after so many years apart, he may simply have forgotten her. Ariel, ever the strategist and surprisingly caring friend, gives Fitz the encouragement she needs to move forward. On the academic side, Rudeus's research into teleportation magic begins to bear real fruit as he identifies striking parallels with summoning magic. Fitz suggests he consult a summoning specialist on campus known as Silent Seven Star, and the moment Rudeus enters that room, he suffers a full psychological breakdown upon recognizing the space where Orsted nearly killed him. Fitz revives him, and the mysterious Seven Star removes her white mask to introduce herself as Nanahoshi Shizuka, a girl from Rudeus's original world, Japan, who was summoned to the fantasy world 5 years ago and hasn't aged a day since. She tests Rudeus with two names, Shinohara Akito and Kuroki Satoshi, neither of which he recognizes, confirming he's not the person she's looking for, but establishing an unlikely alliance. Nanahoshi theorizes that the mass teleportation disaster was a side effect of the spell that summoned her, and agrees to share her knowledge with Rudeus in exchange for his mana to power her experiments. A full year into their time at the university, Rudeus has become something of a campus legend, the student who defeated Fitz, humbled Linnea and Persena, and took down a Demon King. He deflects all attempts to draft him into any leadership position. Things are comfortable, almost too comfortable, until an invitation from Soldat pulls him away briefly for a clan reunion. During the trip, he parts ways with Elena-Lise and Cliff, who head off on their own adventuring to give Cliff some real-world experience. What marks this episode as pivotal, though, is what happens in the library. After a handful of small, charged encounters with Fitz around campus and in the stacks, Rudeus finally admits to himself, clearly and without ambiguity, that he has romantic feelings for her, and simultaneously begins seriously doubting that Fitz is actually male. His suspicion is confirmed in the most chaotic way possible when Fitz trips and falls directly on top of him, and the brief physical contact is enough to tell him definitively, she is a woman. Fitz flees in mortification. Rudeus, for his part, notices something else in that moment, a very significant sign that his impotence may not be as permanent as he feared. With that realization, Rudeus makes a decision. He is going to pursue Fitz. With Rudeus now knowing Fitz's true gender, Ariel puts gentle but persistent pressure on Sylphie to finally reveal herself. Sylphie is still terrified that after all this time, Rudeus simply won't remember her. Ariel and Luke put a plan in motion to jog his memory. Fitz invites Rudeus on an outing deep into the winter forest to collect a rare flower, a seemingly casual invitation with a hidden purpose. Once they're far enough from shelter, Sylphie secretly casts a rain spell, soaking them both to the bone before they can retreat to a cave. Wet and cold, Rudeus strips to prevent hypothermia and advises Fitz to do the same. But Fitz, in a moment of quiet vulnerability, asks him to undress her instead. He does. And the moment he sees her clearly, recognition washes over him. This is Sylphie, his childhood friend, the girl he parted from at the Fitoa teleportation disaster, the person who has been beside him this entire time at the university, completely undetected. Sylphie, her disguise finally gone, her cover finally broken, looks up at the person she has been silently devoted to across years and continents and confesses, plainly and without ceremony, that she loves him. Rudeus responds with a confession of his own. He loves her too, but the reunion hits an immediate, frustrating wall. His impotence still hasn't fully resolved, and when it becomes clear that the moment they've both waited years for won't be happening tonight, the air deflates. Sylphie, ever pragmatic and deeply in love, is not deterred. She reports back to Ariel and Luke, and the two of them mobilize immediately. Luke produces a powerful, rare aphrodisiac that should be strong enough to cut through Rudeus's psychological block, while Ariel provides tactical seduction advice with the breezy confidence. Sylphie meets Rudeus that night, they both take the aphrodisiac, and it works. The next morning is where the real emotional payoff lives. Waking up and realizing Sylphie is still there, that she has not left him, is the precise experience Rudeus needed. He is cured. He weeps. He thanks Ariel by pledging his genuine loyalty to her, then turns to Sylphie and asks for her hand in marriage with every ounce of sincerity he possesses. She says yes. Ariel releases Sylphie from the Fitz alias and formally welcomes Rudeus into her inner circle. Sylphie, radiant, thanks Ariel and Luke for making all of it possible. Newly engaged and determined to figure out what adulthood looks like in a fantasy world, Rudeus consults Zenoba and Cliff, two arguably not ideal advisors, on the subject of marriage customs and quickly determines that step one is buying a house. He lands on a deeply discounted, borderline abandoned mansion with a reputation for mysterious murders and haunting activity that has scared off every previous resident. Rudeus, Zenoba, and Cliff investigate the mansion together and discover the source of the supernatural activity. A secretly constructed moving doll built by a previous resident. Instead of being horrified, Zenoba is immediately and completely captivated, volunteering on the spot to take charge of researching the doll. With the haunting explained and the mansion renovated, Rudeus takes Sylphie to see her future home. Standing in a space that is now theirs, Rudeus gets down on one knee and proposes to her properly, a clean, joyful moment of real happiness. Rudeus and Sylphie throw a proper wedding feast, inviting their entire circle, friends, classmates, Ariel, Nana Hoshi, and Sylphie finally publicly removes the Fitz disguise and reveals her true identity to everyone. The celebration is warm and chaotic in equal measure until Elena Lee suddenly breaks down in tears, and what follows recontextualizes her character entirely. Sylphie, who had heard stories of her grandmother being one of Paul's traveling companions, looks at the weeping Elena Lees and puts it together. She is her grandmother. Elena Lees confirms it and admits she hid their relationship out of terror that her curse and her reputation would harm her descendants. Ariel then inserts herself into the proceedings, demanding that Rudeus duel Luke to prove himself worthy of Sylphie. He wins with ease, and quietly asks Rudeus to keep Sylphie focused on her family rather than palace politics. And then, finally, the reception ends, the house goes quiet, and Rudeus and Sylphie step into their life as a married couple. The calm of newlywed domesticity is interrupted by several converging pressures. A letter from Paul confirms he is heading to Begarit to search for Zenith, and that he's sending Aisha and Norn to live with Rudeus while he's gone. On the research front, Nanahoshi's latest teleportation experiment ends in catastrophic failure, triggering a complete nervous breakdown that leaves her catatonic, a sight that hits Rudeus with uncomfortable recognition because he sees his own past rock bottom reflected back at him. He moves her into his house to recover and rallies his classmates to help crack the magic circle problem. Zenoba, drawing on his study of the moving doll, contributes the concept of compound circles, multiple layered magic circles working in concert, which turns out to be exactly the missing piece. The redesigned circle is tested and successfully summons a plastic bottle from the modern world, a small object, an enormous emotional victory for Nanahoshi, who now has genuine proof that going home is possible. The episode ends on two quiet notes: Nanahoshi, for the first time, attending a class party and actually smiling among people she trusts, and Rudeus returning home to find Aisha and Norn waiting on his doorstep, escorted all the way there by Rudeus. Rudeus's brief visit is characteristically meaningful. Before departing, he pulls Rudeus aside and offers an offhand but significant observation. Eris likely couldn't express her feelings properly when she left. It's a small seed planted in the narrative that will bloom much later. The more immediate challenge is the dramatically different ways in which Aisha and Norn have arrived. Aisha is thrilled to be with Rudeus, enthusiastic and immediately capable, insisting on taking over all housework for the mansion with such competence that Rudeus can barely object. Norn is the opposite. She has not forgiven Rudeus for his fight with Paul at Millis. She is wary of him as a stranger more than a brother. She requests to live in the dormitory rather than the family home, and Rudeus reluctantly allows it, hoping that the distance will give her space to find her footing and make friends. 1 month later, that hope has flatly not materialized. Norn is isolated, barely attending class, pulling away from everyone around her. Meanwhile, the Beast Girls Linnea and Persena are caught stealing girls' underwear around campus in what they sincerely believe is a gesture of moral support for Rudeus, requiring him to have a deeply awkward explanatory conversation with Ariel. Alarmed by Norn's deteriorating situation, Rudeus storms her dormitory ready to confront whoever is bullying her, only to have the carpet pulled from under him when he actually talks to her classmates and discovers the real problem. They've been inadvertently comparing Norn to Rudeus constantly, framing every interaction through the lens of her famous brother, and Norn, who desperately wants to be seen as her own person, has shut down entirely under the weight of that comparison. Understanding now that this requires a personal conversation rather than an intervention, Rudeus enlists Sylphie, Linnea, and Persena to help him infiltrate the girls' dormitory. He makes it to Norn's room, and sitting with her in the quiet, something in him shifts. He remembers his past life, the years he spent as a shut-in, and how his older brother tried to reach him across that wall. Norn, meanwhile, is fighting her own battle between fear of rejection and the memory of Paul and Rudeus, both telling her to trust her brother. She finally does. Rudeus tells her simply that he is there, that she can come to him with anything, and the wall comes down. Afterwards, watching Norn return to class and to something resembling happiness, Rudeus is genuinely proud and quietly considers asking Nanahoshi to carry a message back to his original world, an apology and a thank you to the older brother he never properly acknowledged. Life in the Greyrot household enters what feels like its warmest stretch of the entire season. Rudeus spending time with Sylphie and his sisters, drafting a book about Rudeus to help restore the Superd's reputation, assisting Nanahoshi's steadily progressing experiments, supporting Cliff's work on a device to counteract Elena Lise's curse, and watching Zenoba's sculpting skills visibly improve under Julie's tutelage. Then Sylphie tells him she is pregnant, and Rudeus is completely overwhelmed, in the best possible way. A letter from Geese arrives. The mission to rescue Zenith has stalled dangerously, and Paul needs help. The human god visits Rudeus in a dream almost immediately, deploying every argument in the toolkit to keep him home. The journey will take 2 years. Sylphie will give birth alone. and, almost as an afterthought, he advises Rudeus to sleep with Linnea or Persina during the next mating season. Rudeus is genuinely torn until Norn confronts him directly. She points out bluntly that Rudeus is the only one strong enough to make this journey, and that standing still while Paul struggles is not an option. Hearing this from the sister who barely spoke to him weeks ago is enough. Rudeus decides to go. With the decision made, the logistics fall into place quickly. Elise agrees to accompany Rudeus without hesitation. Nanahoshi discloses something she has kept private until now. There is a secret teleportation circle nearby that can transport them directly to Begarit and back, cutting the entire journey down to approximately 1 month. This is the difference between Rudeus missing the birth of his child and making it home in time. Sylphie has serious reservations about using teleportation magic given the trauma of the original disaster, but Rudeus promises her that he will be back before their child arrives. Cliff, who has spent weeks working up to this, declares his love for Elise at the point of departure, and promises to marry her the moment she returns. Rudeus and Elise step through the circle and land in the middle of a Begarit desert. They make their way on foot through the harsh landscape and arrive at the city of Rapin, where the reunion with Paul's party is finally within reach. Geese finds Rudeus and Elise in Rapin and leads them to Paul, who is genuinely stunned that they arrived so quickly. Paul and Elise make peace over an unspecified incident from their shared past. Paul then delivers the full picture of the situation. Zenith went missing deep inside a nearby labyrinth. The teleporter labyrinth, infamous for its lethal complexity, and despite repeated attempts, his party has been unable to locate her. Worse, Roxy herself vanished after accidentally triggering a teleportation trap inside. Rudeus produces a book he borrowed specifically for this purpose, which documents a past exploration of the labyrinth in detail. Geese confirms the information is genuine. That night, Rudeus and Paul catch up properly. Rudeus tells his father about Sylphie, their marriage, and the pregnancy. The following day, the full party, Rudeus, Elise, Paul, Geese, and Talhand, enters the teleporter labyrinth. Using the book as a guide, they navigate to the third stratum with surprising efficiency, where Rudeus detects signs of Roxy's presence and pulls her from the grip of a monster horde. Roxy is rescued, but the reunion is immediately bittersweet. She doesn't recognize Rudeus at first. The party returns to town to let her recover, and Rudeus spends careful, deliberate time with her, while notably keeping quiet about his marriage and Sylphie's pregnancy. Roxy, for her part, has clearly fallen in love with Rudeus somewhere in the labyrinth's darkness, and asks him to promise they'll explore an easier dungeon together someday. Once Roxy recovers, the party pushes back into the labyrinth, battling through to the 5th stratum and the last room catalogued in Rudeus's book. Here, in a quiet moment, working through the room's mechanisms, Rudeus identifies its architectural similarity to the ruins he and Elise used to travel to Begarit, and locates a hidden staircase that opens the path forward to the 6th stratum and hopefully to Zenith. The 6th stratum delivers the season's most devastating sequence. The party descends and finds Zenith, but she is encased in a crystal, protected by the labyrinth's guardian, a manatite hydra, a creature so powerful it absorbs magic and regenerates every severed head instantly. Paul, upon seeing Zenith trapped, loses all tactical composure and throws himself at the hydra in a berserk charge that achieves nothing except nearly getting him killed. The party retreats to the 5th stratum to regroup, Paul seething. Roxy says that manatite hydras can only be harmed by magic attacks delivered at point-blank range. Rudeus contributes the ancient strategy: fire at the neck stumps to cauterize and prevent regeneration, drawn from the Greek myth of Heracles. The second assault is brutal but effective, and the hydra falls. The victory, however, comes at a price that the season has been quietly building toward since the first episode. In the chaos of the final moments, Rudeus loses his left hand, and Paul, sword moving before thought, instinct before survival, throws himself in front of an attack meant for his son and dies. The party cremates his body in the Labyrinth and carries Zenith's unconscious form back to Rappan. 4 days later, Zenith wakes, but she is not herself. The woman who surfaces from the coma has suffered severe brain damage, her memories and personality fundamentally altered. Paul is gone, and Rudeus sits with that fact in a grief so layered it barely has edges. He thinks about his parents from his original life, the people he never properly mourned, the apologies he never delivered, and finds himself standing in the overlap between two sets of loss. Roxy comes to his room that night, not with words, but with presence, and stays. The next morning carries its own weight of information. Lilia confirms that according to Elinalise, Zenith's memory loss is permanent and complete recovery is not expected. But Lilia, steady and clear-eyed, tells Rudeus directly that caring for Zenith is her purpose now. The party begins the journey home, bringing Lilia and Zenith with them. Somewhere on the road, Rudeus tells Roxy the truth. He is married. She absorbs this calmly, then tells him she already knew. Elinalise had told her. Also, she has no intention of disrupting his marriage. The conversation might have ended there, but Elinalise intervenes, drawing the parallel between Rudeus's situation and Paul's, a man who loved both Zenith and Lilia, fully and without diminishing either. Rudeus asks Roxy to be his second wife. She tells him she will answer after he asks Sylphie first. As he watches the sun rise over the road home, Rudeus acknowledges what he has known for a long time. He is, in more ways than one, his father's son. Rudeus comes home. His first instinct upon arriving, shaped by the human god's cryptic warnings, is to check that everyone is safe, and they are. Once Norn returns to the house, Rudeus gathers the whole family and tells them about Paul. Lilia and Zenith are welcomed into the household. Then comes the harder conversation. Rudeus tells Sylphie about his feelings for Roxy and asks her permission to take Roxy as his second wife. Norn, protective and incensed, pushes back hard on behalf of her sister-in-law, but Sylphie, who understands Rudeus, understands what Roxy means to him and grew up watching Paul love both Zenith and Lilia, accepts. Roxy, true to her word, waits. 1 month later, Sylphie gives birth to their daughter, Lucy Greyrat. With Lucy here and Sylphie's blessing given, Roxy and Rudeus are married. In the season's final scene, Rudeus visits Paul's grave alone. He thanks his father for the life he lived, for the family he built, for the sacrifices he made, and for dying the way he did, protecting his son. He makes a promise to watch over the Greyrat family, to be the person Paul raised him to be, and to live a life, finally, genuinely, with no regrets.